I had learned about this assignment given to us from the board of directors. And it was downhill from there because what we were doing was not in line with what we were presenting to the public and to the members. And I could not do it anymore. After I had resigned, no one had any idea until the following board meeting where the president told them that Zach had personal issues. And that was all that was said. I don't have personal issues. I think that's really important for me to say. I had very professional issues with the president and the CEO and the movement that they were making while I was in a board position.
The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics is a 501c industry trade association and the largest organization of registered dietitians, nutrition and dietetic technicians registered, and other dietetic professionals as members in the United States. It has a purpose to accelerate improvements in global health and well-being through food and nutrition. The Academy was founded in 1917, and it's not without its fair share of controversy. From industry ties to infighting, it has a pretty interesting history. Today, we'll be discussing an overview on some of the controversies in and surrounding the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and then we will roll into an interview with the former House Speaker-elect, and we'll be discussing some of the concern, particularly within. I'm going to be transparent. I have had a overall positive experience being a member of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. I've had kind of a long history with the Academy. At that same time, the Academy needs to be held to a very high standard, with it having the purpose of what it wants to, with it being a large body of nutrition professionals. Dietitians and other members, other people have a right to discuss some concerns and discuss them in a public space and with transparency. And so that's what we are doing today. If all that sounds good to you, let's go. Hi folks, welcome to my channel, or welcome back. My name is Kat. I'm a licensed and registered dietitian nutritionist, and on this channel I like to talk about weight inclusive and weight neutral focused approaches to health, as well as diving into scammy and, in my opinion, unethical nutrition related businesses and products, mostly nutrition related MLMs and other fear mongering nutrition related claims. Now today's video is going to be a little bit different because we are focusing our topic on dietitians, a large organization of dietitians, an organization who has taken the ownership of being a leader in the dietetic space. I have never made a video about a professional organization before, especially not a dietetic one, and especially not one that I was a member of for so long. Now, for a little bit more of that background, I became a member of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. It was before they switched their name. It used to be the American Dietetic Association, and I became a member when I was still a student. It was 2011 or 2012 when I joined, so it was over a decade ago. Now, last year, in May of last year, recording this, so in May of 2023, I did not renew my membership, and so I have not been a member for now a full calendar year. Now, I joined when I was still a student. It was highly recommended by my school professors, and totally understandable. I got so much benefit out of it being a student and also like getting into the field of dietetics. Now, one of the main reasons why I maintained my membership, it was very important to me because according to the most recent numbers that I could find, 3.3% of dietetic professionals are Hispanic and only 0.3% are Indigenous. And so as someone in that space, I felt it was really important to share and have that representation and to be a part of that number, just to increase the diversity that I believe the nutrition field needs, especially within dietetics. There's not a lot of diversity in the dietitian space. But anyway, I did get a lot of professional support, a lot of resources throughout the years. I was on the Academy's diversity committee several years back. Before then, I was able to go to the headquarters and I attended several conferences. I was a member of the student advisory committee, and so that was a really great opportunity where they brought us to the headquarters and took us to the conference, and it was a fun time. And that was like in 2014, 2015. And throughout the years since then, I have found that the Find a Dietitian option on their website it's not provided me with like tons of clients, but I would get a couple throughout the year, and so that would cover my membership dues. That was valuable to me as a small business owner. And I also enjoyed going to the state conferences. Every state has their own chapter and they put on their own conference. Most recently, I attended the Texas one last year, where I was actually able to present and talk about anti-MLM, specifically discussing the concerns around the business model and the excessive health claims and sometimes the health professionals that fall into them. Now, with all that being said, this is not the first time that I have been critical of the Academy, and it likely won't be the last time. If you are aware of my channel, you know that I like to talk through things, shady actions going on. I believe that as a member, you should feel comfortable and should be able to discuss your concerns in a public space and not be fearful of sharing your thoughts, your opinions, your experiences, your concerns overall. I value that kind of speech. I value that kind of discourse. And I value holding a professional organization to a high standard. So let's get into it. Last year, I was just scrolling through Facebook and I came across a post from a friend and fellow dietitian, Zach Breeding. So he popped up on my feed and he said, "Love me, hate me, say what you want about me. Despite my appreciation for smaller organizations that do the good work, such as LAHIDAN, which stands for Latinos and Hispanics in Dietetics and Nutrition Member Interest Group, and COGA, which is the Cultures of Gender and Age Member Interest Group. Both are groups within the Academy. There are several different small groups within the Academy. So going back to this, despite the good work, such as from LAHIDAN, COGA, and the House of Delegates, I am not idly standing by while the Board of Directors continues their surface level alignment with the IDEA, which stands for the Academy's Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access Action Plan, as they continue to have inside conversations full of bigotry, classism, implicit bias, and microaggressions. While the board wishes to rip the funding away from these smaller organizations over time, outsiders must loudly object since insiders are not allowed to speak to the public about the inner wrongdoings of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics." Now, when I saw this, as soon as I saw this, I immediately reached out to Zach. Partially because I wanted to know the tea, but I was really moved by that part where he said outsiders must loudly object statement, because even though I was a member at that time that I saw that, but I did not know about any of this, and so I wanted to get more information because it's hard for me to loudly object without having that information. And so that ultimately led to the whole reason why I'm doing this video in the first place. Because if there is bigotry, classism, microaggressions going on in any organization that I'm a part of, I believe it's a bare minimum to discuss this at least. I did not feel like my membership dues, I did not want to, that's why I didn't join again or didn't renew. And that's why I wanted to bring some awareness to the situation. And because of the history within the Academy's history and so many of the controversies surrounding it, I believe it's important to share more of that history just so you just have more information. There are several concerns that dietitians have had about the Academy over the years, before I became a dietitian and since being a dietitian. It comes up every so often. And I have always been one as a member and as somebody who was in leadership, in very small ways, but in those different committees and on the state level and stuff. But I also want to say that if you are a member of the Academy, this is not to you as a fellow dietitian or as a student. I don't have any ill will towards you. It's kind of the same thing when I talk about MLMs. I really like to focus on corporate and the structure of the business that's as the issue, rather than attacking individual distributors, right? The victims themselves, people who have fallen victim to that larger issue. So if we've worked together, if we've crossed paths with the Academy and stuff, know that I probably very highly appreciate you. Overall, I've had so many quality just connections that I have made being part of this organization. I had a dream, a huge goal when I attended my very first Academy of Nutrition Dietetics conference seeing people speak up there, I had a goal at that point to be one of those speakers one day. And I've been working on building that up by talking at different smaller conferences. I've even spoken at 2 state conferences. And I was using those to, one, share the information that I think is very important to share, but also to build my skills and to build my resume in order to apply to speak at the national conference. That was just one of my career goals. And I know that's not gonna happen now with me doing this video. That is okay. It is still important to talk about, and there will be other opportunities, other things. So with all of that being said, let's get into some of the history, some of the controversies, some of the concerns regarding the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and then we'll roll into the interview with Zach. As a side note, whenever I see like non-related people bashing the Academy with misinformation, I still go into like defense mode for that. But at that same time, I can still like critically look at something that I was a part of and just have that conversation. So just wanted to put that out there. Let's start with Lenna Frances Cooper. Now, this specifically was a more recent kind of finding or more recent information, but because this was one of the founders, let's discuss this first. So Lenna Frances Cooper, she was born in 1875 and passed in 1961. She was an American dietitian and co-founder of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. Now, she had involvement, allegedly, in the practice around eugenics, specifically with involvement with Dr. John Harvey Kellogg. Now, he was a notorious advocate, supporter, and practitioner of eugenics and the eugenics movement. Her involvement created an environment in which Cooper was either involved, silently complicit, or in support of the practice of eugenics, the belief and values of eugenics, and or the movement of eugenics. Now, that comes from an internal investigation that the Academy did, and they did that because of an award utilizing her name, or an award in memory of her name. So with that, they concluded that it was not appropriate to continue with the naming of the award. It was called the Lenna Frances Cooper Memorial Lecture Award, and they would give that out at the conferences, like at the annual conference. Now, they found that through the involvement in the Race Betterments Conference, the Better Babies Conference, and with Dr. Kellogg through financial and employment ties, that Lenna Cooper was at the very least complacent when confronted with the practice of eugenics. And so they did change that award name over to the Distinguished Lecture Award instead. Now, before I get any comments about how like this was a different time, this was like acceptable at this time, it was acceptable to be in support of eugenics, I fundamentally disagree. She passed in 1961. That really was not that long ago. She was an adult at the time that my grandparents were adults. And the amount of colorism and racism that they received, like, no, it was not acceptable. It was bad. Even then. But anyway, in 1981, there were actually membership resignations over a decision to support President Reagan's cuts in what was then called food stamps. Food stamps are now called the SNAP, or Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, but there was support in that cut of food stamps and school lunch programs. Now, this is actually an excerpt from a New York Times article. So it says, "This is not the first controversial action the Dietetics Association has taken. Last fall," so that would be fall of 1981, "contrary to the sentiments of most nutritionists and some of its members who resigned in protest, it supported Ronald Reagan's cuts in food stamps and school lunch programs. The decision was made by the leaders without consulting membership. At an association workshop in Washington last March, only 10 of the 33 state coordinators presented expressed support for the position." So I thought that was really interesting. That was something that I had never heard about until I was doing this kind of information gathering for this video. Now, jumping to a more recent issue, this was actually in 2015. I remember this going down. I remember being so embarrassed being a member. This was actually the first year that I became a dietitian. This feels like it was so recent, but it really wasn't. Eat Right is the slogan that the Academy uses. That's the name of the website, and they have an offshoot of that for children's nutrition, for pediatrics. Now, Kraft Singles, the cheese, they put on their cheese the Kids Eat Right logo on their cheese product. This was huge. Now, if you are aware of my channel and my approaches and stuff, you know that I have a food neutral approach. Food is inherently not like good or bad. You eating it doesn't make you good or bad or morally like inferior or whatever. Now, that doesn't mean that they're like equivalent in the sense of the amount of like nourishment, nutrients that it provides. That's different. But I don't like demonizing specific foods. I have a history in disordered eating, and it's just not something that I would recommend people to do, working with many of the people that I work with. Food is neutral. Let's take it into context. Let's approach it with curiosity, compassion, and context in order to make choices that fit within that time. And there's just a lot of skill within that. But overall, my issue with the logo being put on any product is that it was put on any product. They did change the label. This was huge though. There were so many people talking about it. And I don't know if it was partially because I was like really in that space, so I was just seeing it everywhere, but it seemed like it was everywhere. I remember articles and videos and posts, just so many people talking about this. And it's just a really gray area, in my opinion, for a professional membership, for the logo of that to be put on a specific, like, a product, regardless of what that product is, whether it is like on the spectrum of less nutrient dense to like most nutrient dense, like just it is a gray area in my opinion. And on the flip side, this really fueled the arguments that dietitians are like paid by big food to like promote their products. And I mean, I've been called that on my channel. I've been told that I get paid by Big Pharma. I'm still waiting for all of my paychecks for that. But regardless, I don't think that it is necessarily appropriate for a professional membership to have logos of their brands on specific products. And that comes from a food neutral place. I remember just as a member at that time, like it was really embarrassing. Now, the Academy did come out with an official statement. They said that it was not an endorsement. There's an email statement to the New York Times that said the Kids Eat Right logo on Kraft Singles packaging identifies the brand as a proud supporter of Kids Eat Right. And that was from the Academy's executive director. So fast forward, there's other stuff, you know, there's always little stuff going on here and there. And I understand that you can never make everyone happy, but still, let's move forward. Let's fast forward. Now, this is something that brought a conversation that has been or had been and continues to be going on. Like it just brought this conversation basically was not new, but how this conversation was being had was new. And that was a published article. It was published to the Journal of Public Health Nutrition. So the title of this article, it was The Corporate Capture of the Nutrition Profession in the USA, the case of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. Now I'm going to read from that. The study explored the interactions between corporations and the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics and their implications for the profession in the USA and globally. So it was an inductive analysis of documents from 2014 to 2020, and they obtained it, they say, through the Freedom of Information request to assess key Academy actors dealing with food, pharmaceutical, and agribusiness corporations. And as far as the results go, they found that the key leaders have ongoing interactions with corporations, which is not new information. These include leaders holding key positions in multinational food, pharmaceutical, and agribusiness corporations, and the Academy accepting corporate financial contributions. They found that the Academy had invested funds in corporations such as Nestle, PepsiCo, and pharmaceutical companies, and has discussed internal policies to fit industry needs, and has had public positions favoring corporations. And in their conclusion, conclusion, they say that the documents reveal a symbiotic relationship between the Academy and the foundation and corporations. Corporations assist the Academy and the Academy's foundation with financial contributions, and the Academy acts as a pro-industry voice in some policy venues and with public positions that clash with the Academy's mission to improve health globally. So in an effort to provide all sides, I will read out the Academy's official statement. It's titled, "The Academy Responds to Inaccurate, Misleading Reports." The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, the world's largest organization of food and nutrition professionals, issued the following statement on October 24th in response to misleading and false allegations contained in the, quote, "The Corporate Capture of the Nutrition Profession in the USA, the Case of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics," end quote, published by Public Health Nutrition. This report is a calculated attack against the more than 112,000 credentialed nutrition and dietetic practitioners whom the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics proudly represents. The report contains numerous factual and methodology errors, omissions, and information taken out of context. As a result, the report contains a great deal of opinion and unsupported assertions, coupled with many factual inaccuracies that mislead the public. Today's report, which purports to be an academic study, is in fact a secondary survey of internal correspondence from a single source, a member of the Academy's leadership, over a period of several years. There is no scientific rigor in the methodology, and the data is presented without context. As the report itself notes, the study does not include interviews with key actors, which would have provided a detailed narrative of actions and decisions in the Academy and the Academy's foundation, and would have helped contextualize our findings. Academy members are advocates for shaping policies and practices to advance positive food choices that improve health and nutrition of the public. Through their assumptions, omissions, and distortions, the authors of the report have done a serious disservice to the Academy, our members, and the entire nutrition and dietetics profession. The report falsely alleges interactions between the corporations and the Academy has implications for the profession in the USA and globally. However, there is no reference in the report to the Academy's stringent guidelines and principles that prohibit external influence from sponsors or any group or individual. Nor does the report cite the fact that less than 3% of the Academy's and its foundation's investments are in food companies, or that less than 9% of the Academy's funding comes from sponsorship. The Academy and the foundation have always been committed to accountability through transparency and our annual reports, scientific integrity principles, research priorities, and public policy advocacy, as well as sponsorship guidelines and principles, and identities of Academy sponsors. The Academy annual reports since 2001 are publicly available and include independently audited financial statements. Key relevant facts not included in the report include the Academy has stringent corporate sponsor guidelines and principles. Sponsors, supporters, and exhibitors are respectful of these guidelines and principles, which include but are not limited to the Academy's programs, leadership decisions, policies, and positions are not influenced by sponsors. The Academy's procedures and formal agreements with external organizations are designed to prevent undue corporate influence. All aspects of sponsorship, such as research, consumer messaging, or professional education of members, align with the Academy's scientific integrity principles. The Academy does not endorse any company, brand, or company products, nor does the Academy's name or logo appear on any product. Such endorsement is neither actual nor implied. In contrast to the allegations made in the report, the Academy Foundation financial investments are managed by an independent investment company that has a sole authority to make decisions to invest or sell equities on the merits of the stocks themselves. Because all sectors of the S&P 500 are represented in the Academy's and the Foundation's portfolios, investment in the consumer staples and healthcare sectors are to be expected. However, the independent investment company makes the final decision to ensure returns meet the Academy's policy requirements. In contrast to the statements in the report, the Academy has never altered a position statement to benefit a corporate sponsor. In the specific instance cited in the report, the Academy Position Committee followed a well-established, rigorous process and received feedback from the internally recognized and highly respected content experts in the field of vegetarian nutrition. Based on these reviews, as well as other expert comments, the APC, or the Academy Position Committee, voted to revise the Academy's vegetarian nutrition position paper, which expired in 2021. They also put out another statement, and they said that this report is primarily based on the Freedom of Information Act requests for a single board member's email. This report is disjointed, mostly opinion, emails taken out of context, picking and choosing items based on words out of board reports, etc. And they say that one of the authors has strong financial ties to CrossFit, a staunch opponent to RDN licensure. Less than 9%, or 12 out of 149 named scholarships, awards, and named research grants were established through the industry. The funds that have established have input on scholarship criteria. They say that less than 2%, or 32 out of 2,812 of donors to the Academy's second century were industry donors. And then they provide their guidelines and principles that prohibit external influence for sponsors and supporters. And some of this is saying the same thing in that other statement, but I'll leave that link down below so you can read it. And they end that with that the Academy and the Foundation have always been committed to accountability through transparency and fiduciary responsibility, annual reports, scientific integrity principles, research priorities, public policy priorities, sponsorship policies, guidelines, and Academy sponsors are all publicly available, and there are links to all of that information. And in a shorter statement, they said that it is preposterous to say that the Academy is funded by industry sponsors when in our most recent fiscal year, 95% of the Academy's annual budget came from member dues, credentialing fees, participation in educational events, purchase of publications and subscriptions, and our accreditation program. Now, throughout the years, the exhibitors at the annual conference has been a topic of concern, has been an issue for many. I know for me, when I saw Herbalife there one year, I was like, no, why are they here? And I know that that's not the Academy supporting Herbalife or supporting any of the individual kind of companies there. And I understand the nuances. It's not like a black or white kind of thing when it comes to who wants to present their information in front of dietitians. Like, it is up to the dietitians to like go through that, like what we do every day, going through the grocery store or like scrolling on the internet and seeing claims and stuff. Like, it is the same kind of thing when it comes to like exhibition kind of things. Now, that is separate from the actual like education pieces when you go through a conference. And there are actually some changes going on with as far as what can be considered for continuing education, and some of the changes around like not being able to name a specific kind of company or product and things like that. But I wanted to provide kind of like both sides to that, because I know if I don't, it'll probably show up in the comments. And as I said before, if I see some like misinformation attacking the Academy, I still am going to at least provide information. If there is kind of misinformation being spread about the Academy, I'm going to do everything I can to provide accurate information, and at the same time still talk about some of my concerns about the organization. So that is kind of a surface level look at several of the main controversies surrounding the Academy from the outside perspective more so. But that doesn't explain some of the concerns happening more internally. So now let's roll into a conversation that I had with Zachary Breeding, specifically stemming from his post. But before we do that, I'd love to introduce him. Zach Breeding is a registered licensed dietitian and holds his certification of specialty in oncology nutrition. He is the owner of Sage Nutritious Solutions, a personalized nutrition and private chef company, and is a dietetic internship program director in Philadelphia. Zach has held leadership positions as the chair of committee for the Lifelong Learning, which plans a food and nutrition conference and expo, the chair of Latinos and Hispanics in Dietetics and Nutrition Member Interest Group, chair of the Cystic Fibrosis Nutrition Dietetic Practice Subgroup, and most recently on the Academy of Nutrition Board of Directors as the House Speaker-elect. Zach has been recognized nationally for his efforts in Hispanic and Latino health disparities, nutrition considerations for the transgender community, cannabis counseling, and cystic fibrosis.
There's so much to uncover. There's so much to unpack here. And I just wanted to say thank you, first off, for taking time out to get on this call and to just share more of that. We just went through, heard about your background, and also reading through your posts that you shared on social media regarding regarding the academy and some of the reasons why you left ultimately. And so I really wanted to dig into that a little bit further. You've always been a leader. I've seen you as a leader in the dietetic field on the national level. And so tell us a little bit about how that started, why you decided to even be an active, not just a member of the academy, but an active member at that.
I really have loved every moment that I have gotten to volunteer with the academy the first 5-6 years of my volunteership. And really the reason for that is I felt very early on the level of support that the academy can give someone, and the amount of elevation the academy can give to someone's career. So I had just become a dietitian in 2013, in the spring of 2013. And it was that Fancy of 2013 that they had the member showcase video, not at member showcase, it was at opening session. So
was that in Houston? Was that the one in Houston?
I feel like that was in Houston.
Okay. Yeah.
I feel like that was in Houston. Yes, because the one before that was Boston, I think, and I was still a student when we went to Boston. So it might have been Orlando.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Either way, let's say it's Boston. Right. So at that time I was volunteering for the South Bronx Health Center under Sandra Arevalo, who is a mentor of mine, a work mom of mine. Like, she's always looked out for me. And I met her because she came to one of my classes at NYU to talk about the South Bronx Health Center and how important it is to work with Hispanic and Latino communities in a socioeconomically disadvantaged kind of area of New York City. And I've volunteered with her for almost 3 years. So I was wrapping that up while I was finishing my internship, while I was, doing my my board exam studies, while I was getting ready for all that stuff. And then I had done part of my internship with NYU Langone Hospital before the hurricane basically destroyed that part of the hospital. They were out of business for almost a year, rebuilding. Needless to say, I had kind of a shaky start to my dietetic career because the place that I would have gone, theoretically, when you're an intern, you always want to get a job where you've interned. So that really wasn't exactly possible because the hospital was still under construction. So I was kind of just doing odds end jobs. I had started the Sage. I was doing a lot of work with recipe development, with uploading cooking videos, with trying to get my name out there as a chef who happened to be a dietitian, as opposed to now I'm a dietitian with a history of being a chef. So that's kind of how I pivoted my career. But definitely at that time, I was doing a lot of culinary stuff. Somehow, someone from the social media team with the academy found me on Twitter and decided to start kind of promoting me. And then they connected to me and said, we would love to have you in this member showcase video at opening session. We're going to bring a camera crew to your apartment in Brooklyn and interview you. And I'm like, I haven't been a dietitian for 6 whole months.
Was that for the magazine, the Food and Nutrition magazine? That's where I first saw you in.
It was all at the same time. So They did the magazine, they did the shoot for Fancy, they did the interview, they did it all at once. It was a whirlwind. I mean, talk about a brand new dietitian.
That's amazing.
Without any connections. I only knew the people that I knew from NYU. I knew no one. And here was this huge carrot put in my face of fame, is what it felt like.
Yeah.
Because the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics was recognizing me. So to me, that felt like everything. Where do I even go from here?
Yeah, that's a huge accomplishment. I mean, for anybody, but especially starting out, it's huge.
And so I contribute that kind of to my culinary background, and I contribute it to luck. Just being in the right place on social media at the right time for that social media team person to look me up and find me and decide that I was worth kind of showcasing.
I mean, at that same time, I remember looking at the nutrition and the magazine that we would get, and I had seen your story. And then the following Fancy, I believe it was, is when I saw you walking around, and I was like, oh, were you in the magazine? And you're like, yeah, it's kind of taken aback. Like, yeah, that was me. And so there was, some luck in there, but I think you have a really good story, like starting out, and it was very interesting. And you had stuck out to me from the magazine reading your story. So don't sell yourself too short.
Oh, no. I mean, and that was really what propelled me for so many years in academy leadership is I was recognizable. And maybe I did some part of that on my own with my own business and my own kind of online persona. And, I'm a personable fella and love to talk to people. So I love talking to people at Fancy. But it really gave me face recognition in the field. And I very much felt like I was responsible for contributing to the success of the Academy as a whole organization because of their intervention in my success so early on, and how that facial and name recognition carried me through even to this day.
Absolutely. And so you weren't volunteering yet with the Academy. So they did that shoot, they ran that story. And then the following year, is that when you started to get more into leadership volunteering?
So that June, or it was maybe earlier that year, 2014, Sandra asked me to run for chair-elect of Lahidan. Okay. And I'm like, Sandra, I am not Hispanic nor Latino. I barely know Spanish. I studied Spanish for like all my years in middle and high school, and all I got out of it was tengo un lápiz. So not helpful. And I'm like, are you sure I'm the right person for the job? And she said, Zach, you are the best for the job. And basically, as my mentor, she empowered me to use my leadership skills in a very structured format. That is the chair-elect, chair, past chair positions for a group that I really advocate for. I mean, Hispanic and Latino dietitians are a very small group of our profession, not even of Academy membership, of our profession. And so what I wanted to do, my mission, was to flip the script on what we believed Lahidan to be like, which was a social group for Hispanic dietitians, and flip it into a resource hub for people who want to learn more about nutrition interventions for the Hispanic and Latino communities. And that they still follow that to this day. Yeah.
That's actually one of the reasons
that was really
why I felt like, because of that switch, which I appreciated, but it was like, okay, well, I already know. So like, I don't want to, pay the additional fee to be in there. So yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, that was how I got started. And then, Lahidan led me to wanting to create a subunit in the medical nutrition practice group, for people with cystic fibrosis, because I was a cystic fibrosis dietitian at the time, and the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation was doing the majority of the research, advocacy, and like professional education opportunities for dietitians who work in cystic fibrosis. The Academy was doing literally nothing. They had no research that was posted on like the history of JAND. Like the research that was published was very sparse. There wasn't an EAL. There was no way basically for a cystic fibrosis dietitian to learn more about cystic fibrosis through the Academy.
Gotcha.
And I'm like, but no one, I mean, at the same time, you have to advocate for it.
Right.
There was a group in the past under the PEDS nutrition practice group, but that kind of fizzled away. It's a very small community of dietitians. I mean, you're talking a couple hundred.
Yeah.
So it's just very small. So I started that subunit under the medical nutrition practice group through all the appropriate ways that you have to work with the academy to do that, thus expanding my network. And then that eventually led me to being a delegate for the House of Delegates for about 3 years. And then I ended up working in the Lifelong Learning Committee, planning FNCE. I did that for almost 3 years. And then I did it for another 3 years as chair. Because again, incoming chair, past chair. Wiggled my way out. And then that's kind of when I started sort of funneling around the idea of elections. And people kept saying, you should run for president. You should run for president. You should run for president. And I'm like, I'm not allowed. Like, you need to be a board of director for at least for your terms in order to run for president. So I'm like, I'll run for a board of director position. And then
the goal was eventually like president.
The goal was president. The mission had always been president of the academy. I really wanted to take what I had done with Lahidan and like flip the script with the academy. I really felt that the president had a key role in the organizational advancement of the profession.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's just not true.
Yeah.
what I learned.
Right.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought. And that's what I really wanted. And I felt like I had a unique perspective compared to the typical majority of academy presidents that we've seen.
And I mean, it sounds like you really like took a lot of ownership in being the change that you want to see. And throughout the years, I mean, there's been so much controversy within the academy. Even when I was an active member and serving in different volunteer spots. And it's like this balance I would always go back to. Well, I'm trying to make it better. I'm trying to be the change on the inside. And it sounds like that's really where your head was at until it reached this kind of point to where no longer could kind of focus in on that, or where no longer like that was sustainable for you.
Right.
Yeah. And all of this was volunteer, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. The academy lives by volunteership. I mean, the bread and butter of the organization are the volunteers. There are a good deal of dietitians who work for the academy. I believe the number is somewhere between 40 and 60% of employees today who are registered dietitians. The rest are association administrators and professionals who are amazing. And I've worked with so many great folks who are not dietitians who work for the academy. Who are just really passionate about putting on a really good show in terms of, I'm thinking specifically right now about FNCE.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you describe a little bit about FNCE, what that is to members? It's been a couple of years since I went and I always had a blast going there. It's really pricey to get a ticket and to get into there. But can you give a little summary?
Yeah, so it's this. It's one of the biggest conferences in the world for nutrition professionals. It really is everything, everywhere, all at once. In that you have an expo hall, and the expo hall is what most people focus on when they think about FNCE, even though not one of the educational sessions are paid for by expo dollars. So the main function of the expo hall is to have a place where members kind of hang out. They'll grab a snack at one of the booths. They'll grab some information about a new tube feeding formula, whatever the case may be. And then the big meat of Sunday and Monday are the educational sessions. They overlap all day long, so you can't go to all of them. There's no way. There's so many happening at the same time period that you might want to go to. So then they also offer like hotter sessions that the Lifelong Learning Committee feels people are going to want to go to based on who they select to be in the Lifelong Learning Committee. I'll get back to that in a minute. And so basically all of these sessions that are hot sessions are collected into a virtual option that when you buy your ticket to FNCE, you also get those virtual sessions that you can watch later on and get your CEUs and all that great stuff. Mm-hmm. There's nighttime events. There are luncheons. There are meetings happening all day with different organizational groups like MIGs or DPGs or the House of Delegates or affiliate groups like Oklahoma Academy, etc. Like everyone's kind of meeting, everyone's going to educational sessions, they're hanging out at the expo, they're going to parties at night, whether it's planned by a group like Ketchum or like the national organizations of Blacks in Dietetics, Nobidon. It's really round the clock. You can be busy all day long, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and then half the day on Tuesday.
Networking to the max, basically.
Oh my gosh. Networking to the max. The Lifelong Learning team creates every year kind of the puzzle of how that will work out. How much of the puzzle is going to be education sessions, how much of the party is going to be field trips, or how much of the puzzle is going to be field trips. Where does the networking piece come in? Do we want to organize networking and do a scavenger hunt? Do we want to have just a little gathering and have people do it themselves? How do we want to focus the year? And that's what I got to do every year that I was on the Lifelong Learning Committee, leading up to taking my own reins as chair. While I was there, we talked about the little chats that happen for 15 minutes, the learning lounge. Mm-hmm. That happens in the hallway between sessions. A speaker will get up with some like little block chairs, just like cushy little blocks, and talk about whatever for 15 minutes. And these topics are really topics where research is limited, but they're hot button topics for us. Mm. So there's really not a space for that at a conference, right? Mm-hmm. That is the space to have those conversations to then carry on and take offline. Gotcha. So that was a really exciting addition that they did. And that team, that core team in the academy who runs Lifelong Learning, which for many years it's been Lori Greenwich and a staff person named Ryan and a staff person named Catherine and a staff person named Nikki. And they're all fabulous, and they're always trying to push the button, and they're always trying to push the committee of volunteer dietitians to think about things differently and try things different and try new things every single year.
Good. Sounds like there's just a lot of continual growth since even the last year that I went to FNCE years ago. Which makes me kind of sad because, as I mentioned in this video earlier, I'm no longer a member of. And so that kind of opportunity it's going to be more expensive if I do go in the future, basically, from not being a member. But it sounds like you've had an overall really positive experience. When did things start to get a little bit not so positive and kind of get you into like moving one foot out the door of the academy?
The very first inkling I had that there was maybe some shadiness awry was the Kraft cheese debacle. I know you mentioned.
Yeah.
And what I learned was that basically the academy, and I'm speaking very generally, I don't know exactly who in the academy, whomever came up with this contract deal with Kraft, they were going to have an entire rollout of information from the academy and from Kraft to talk about calcium for children.
So that was just the very beginning.
Right. That was the purpose of all of it. And then Kraft went ahead and shot the gun too soon. And the Academy didn't, their rollout did not happen as planned. And so for our perspective, it looked like a hot mess.
Yeah, it was embarrassing, honestly. I mean, everybody was talking about it.
I remember Jimmy Fallon making fun of it.
Yeah. It was a big thing. Yeah.
And yet, no one from the Academy stood up. There was more press about the mess up than press from the Academy explaining what had happened. It was so tight-lipped. And it was so, this didn't happen. This doesn't exist. That was the internal mindset. And I'm like, whoa, what? Okay. I mean, I wouldn't have done it this way, but all right. I guess that's what we're doing. I guess we're not going to be speaking up about this. And that was, looking back, that was the first moment that I was like, I'm not sure. Something might be awry here. But I let it go and moved on. Really, it was after I had ran for Speaker of the House and after I was elected. And in the first month of being the Speaker-elect, I had learned about this assignment given to us from the board of directors. And it was downhill from there.
So in your full letter of resignation, you wrote that your decision to resign, quote, has been influenced by the one, direct comments made by the board members that I feel steer the organization away from being member focused. 2, the toxic environment that has been created by the board of directors on the leadership team. And 3, the lack of inclusion and equity by part of the Academy to accommodate my needs as a full-time employed practicing registered dietitian nutritionist and manager of food operations. Moving into your social media posts, you wrote that you were not idly standing by while the board of directors continues their surface level idea with the idea, as they continue to have inside conversations full of bigotry, classism, implicit bias, and microaggressions, and that outsiders must object. That's kind of why I decided to reach out to you, because I was one of those outsiders. I still am one of those outsiders, being a member, but not knowing anything of what's going on behind the scenes. As I read through your letter of resignation, I had so many questions about the events and the situations mentioned. And so I wanted to highlight some of the concerns that you wrote about that led up to this point of you leaving. So in your letter of resignation, you mentioned that for the past year, navigating the continued mistrust and concern received by Academy members and delegates became the standard part of being involved in the HOD leadership team. That does not surprise me, because being on the outside, I see a lot of mistrust and concern from members going back to in random Facebook groups, dietitian Facebook groups, and just social media in general. But can you expand on some of those complaints and those comments, what the common theme was, what was the root of those complaints, and where were they coming from?
Yeah, so a little history. The House of Delegates receives issues of which the House leadership team decides which to choose from based on a variety of different methods. So the issues come to the House in a variety of ways, either directly from member interest groups or DPGs, through a comment portal that's actually on Eat Right Pro that you can send an issue directly to the House, or via the board of directors. So if you're a board of director, whether or not you're a dietitian, whether or not whatever your role is on the board is irrelevant, you can kind of request the board suggest that the House work on something. Or it could just be at the whim of whatever the president or CEO wants based on their mission for that year.
Okay.
So the board, at some point in time, paid for an external consulting company to assess the role, function, and efficiency of the board of directors as a whole. they also looked into the House of Delegates. Now, years before this, when I was a delegate for the Academy, we were asked to reconsider the function, role, and scope of the House of Delegates, of which we said, why would we cut out the voice of the members? We want to keep the House as is. What we do, we're up for discussion, but the fact that we merely exist needs to continue. Mm-hmm. And so this was the second time that the House was being asked to reconsider their own scope, role, and function by request of the board of directors in less than 5 years. So right off the bat, there are members who have been delegates for many years. They just keep cycling and rotating in and out because not a lot of people want to volunteer. And this is where, in my letter, I talked about how it became difficult for me to volunteer as a food operations manager. If you're a working clinical dietitian on the floors all day long, and the majority of Academy volunteer meetings happen during 9 to 5 working hours, how can you volunteer? Right. How can you really spend your time dedicated to the Academy because you have a job?
Yeah.
So because of that limited volunteer pool, there is a lot of rewashing, reusing of people, including myself. Mm-hmm. So when I came into the House, we were given this assignment of the House leadership team. So this was in a bylaws amendment. And so the bylaws amendment would explicitly reduce the size of the board, which had to go through the House of Delegates. That reduction of the size of the board would have directly negatively impacted the number of folks from the House leadership team on the board of directors. Mm-hmm. We were meant to take and create this bylaws amendment into something that the House could vote for. So we had to do what was being asked of us and push to the entire House of Delegates that this was up for debate again. Mm-hmm. Remember, a lot of those delegates had done this before with me the first time when I was a delegate then. Mm-hmm. And so their voices were just as loud as anyone else's to the new delegates. So the new delegates learned that we had already discussed this, right, that it's happening again. Mm-hmm. And all the disgruntlement from the delegates that had already been there. So everyone was fired up. Who were they fired up at? Us, the House leadership team. Mm-hmm. Because we were the ones who rolled out the idea to begin with. Because the board didn't say anything. At no point did the board speak directly to the House of Delegates about this decision. It was only and primarily through us.
Do you know why that was, or did you have an idea of why?
So it seemed like the House was our responsibility and chain of command. Mm-hmm. Why would the board supersede the House leadership team to talk to members about what was going on? Right. Why would also the board take responsibility for it when we were honestly, we were really easy scapegoats? Mm-hmm. What the board did ask of us is that we held all of the angry members responsible for being angry. And if we needed to fire a delegate, we were given permission to fire a delegate who was angry about this bylaws amendment. At no point did the CEO or the president at that time, we have a new president and a new CEO right now, say that the criticism should be a sign that we should change course. So the consultant team was really asking that we not have a house the way that we have a house, and that the house doesn't play a role in board functions. Additionally, on eatrightpro.org, it talks about how the member interest groups, mm-hmm, the DPGs, the committees, the task forces, the House, all these folks are responsible for a collective leadership in the academy infrastructure.
Mhm.
And that is just not what I experienced,
Oh.
especially during this time, because the House was seen as not being perhaps an essential role of organizational function. A few things happened because of this. Not only were we getting a barrage of complaints from members who were delegates, all delegates are members, so we were getting a barrage of complaints from delegates, but the speaker at that time was being harassed by delegates for this change, not only because of the lack of communication from the board. And I say that because the lack of communication from the board meant that the Speaker of the House was responsible for answering and addressing all questions and concerns. The House leadership team was very communicative with the board about the complaints that were coming from the delegates about the bylaws amendment. So in one of these calls with the CEO and the president, the CEO had mentioned that really the goal here is to reduce the size and function of the House of Delegates simply to a group of dietitians who would make recommendations only when being asked to do so, and that they would no longer have constituents. So the delegates...
That was the bylaw change. That was the goal.
That was the mission. The delegates were to not have people who they represent, that they would represent for the academy, not be representative of a specific group. And those were exact words that we were always given, representing for, not of.
Which I believe you wrote something about it going completely against what the academy kind of prides itself as being member driven.
100%. If the only way for members to get their voices heard is through the House of Delegates. So when the CEO mentioned that she wanted to change the House of Delegates to a group where there were no constituents, and the delegates were merely acting as a group of people, it completely got the member-driven piece out of being a member-driven organization. Now, the communication that we had that went to the House of Delegates was carefully crafted, edited meticulously. And so what we were saying to the delegates really didn't mean much, because what you lacked was real talk, addressing the real concerns.
The human.
Like we couldn't just... Right. We couldn't just speak as people. Our directive was clear. And so what we wanted to say to the House of Delegates, we were not allowed to say to the House of Delegates, because the messaging was coming directly from the board, not from the House leadership team, because this was never our decision to begin with. We were the ones receiving all of the complaints, and we were the ones responsible for handling all the complaints. No one else supported us in that role. The president didn't support us, and the CEO didn't support us. So many folks during this barrage of complaints, and I keep going back to it because it was such a traumatic experience. All the complaints, the majority of the complaints were so valid. And they were really coming from dietitians who had volunteered at the academy for decades. This wasn't, oh, I want this because I want to keep the house big because it's the way it's always been. It was this amount of people we need to bring the voices of dietitians who are otherwise disengaged with the profession forward, so it can be heard by the professional organization. It was so hard to have to ignore those messages, because what could we have done with them?
Right.
If we were the beginning and end of all complaints, what could we have done without any support from above?
Right.
So many people in the HLT were crying, felt completely alone, felt that the board left us abandoned. They weren't doing, when I say this specifically, the president did not do anything to ameliorate the mistrust for us.
Mm-hmm.
It was our responsibility to ameliorate the mistrust and redevelop the culture of the House of Delegates because of a decision that was never ours that we made in the first place. It was a really difficult decision to be in. There were delegates who called the speaker directly at all hours to explain their heartfelt responses about this. They were upset too.
Mm-hmm.
And I really was concerned about how the speaker was in this position and put in this position to handle all of these things. That is not the job of the speaker.
Right.
That is not what I ran for. That is not the position that I was asked to volunteer for. I do that at work. I get paid to change culture at work.
You get paid to do that. Yeah. Really.
I'm not getting paid to change the culture of my professional organization.
Mm-hmm. And it's a
As
huge
Speaker of the
responsibility. That's huge.
No.
Yeah.
Right. It's no single person's responsibility to do that.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, when we brought an official bylaws amendment to the House, it was obviously voted almost unanimously to not go through with it. It wasn't like it was 55-45.
Mm-hmm.
It was an overwhelming majority of delegates voted against it, which we knew. It wasn't long after that the president came out with the President's Strategic Advancement Groups and then started picking people and asking for volunteers of people to be part of these. And those President's Strategic Advancement Groups was exactly what they wanted the House to be.
Mm.
That was the mission, right?
Mm-hmm. So they just
Members
did that alongside of having the House.
They did it anyway. They rolled it out anyway. So then they rolled that out, and the House goes, they're doing our job?
Mm-hmm.
Like almost every delegate reached out to us and said, what is this? Why is this being rolled out? This is everything that they're being asked to do in these President's Strategic Advancement Groups are the roles of the House of Delegates. Or even though we turned down this bylaws amendment, are we being like phased out?
Right. What
Some
does
delegates
this mean
thought
for your
it was
positions?
Right. Some delegates thought it was retaliation from the board.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we couldn't say anything. So it's like being a boss of an operation and having to push down messaging from your boss, but you're not allowed to talk about it or address it or explain it or clarify it because of saying something wrong. Because again, the messaging had to be so well crafted to not put anybody in trouble. You didn't want to be named. So your team is never going to trust you. You can never build culture with poor communication. As a delegate, in their mindset, if the House leadership team doesn't believe in their own house, why should we trust that they have our best interests in mind to begin with?
Right.
And that was the crux of the entire year of me being a speaker-elect.
Can you tell me more about the statement of the CEO directing the organization while the president directs a profession and the intimidation that you felt by the CEO as you were approaching that speaker position? Again,
this is the former CEO, not the current one.
Right.
So the former CEO, well, and the one we have now for that matter, they're not dietitians. They're association professionals, which is fabulous. But the former CEO was not a dietitian, but she put herself in the direct line to have input on all professional issues. This bylaws amendment was not the president's idea. It had been going on before that president even came in as president-elect.
The CEO had been there for a while. I remember I met her when I was on the student advisory committee. That's
exactly it. That's exactly it. So this was always their idea. Like this was always her idea. This was from the beginning the CEO's kind of plan. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether it was because of looking at outside groups and comparing us. I don't know if it was because they wanted a legacy to leave behind of improving the Academy's overall success for the future by doing this. I don't know. But her direct involvement on everything related to the bylaws amendment, the size of the House, for example, is completely outside of the scope of managing the organization. It's a professional issue.
Right.
The president was acting in the interest of the CEO, and that he was really following this representative for and not of scenario where he felt that the CEO was making the right call and just following what she wanted.
Mm-hmm.
When the bylaws amendment did not pass, the CEO called the speaker directly to blame her for the bylaws amendment not passing.
Oh.
The speaker was extremely upset and distraught by this. Why would I want to hop into a position where the CEO feels carte blanche to call me and berate me when the House of Delegates decides to do something?
Right.
That is not what I'm here to do. If reducing the size of the HOD somehow resulted in a reappropriation of funds,
Mm-hmm.
I could understand how that would be an organizational issue. For example, reducing the amount of House leadership team members on the board of directors would be something the CEO would have a role in, because the CEO is the head of the board of directors.
Mm-hmm.
We get financial reimbursement for trips, going to Fancy,
Right.
we get free membership, all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So if the House leadership team theoretically isn't on the board of directors, it would mean less money was being spent. Okay, I can get behind why the CEO is involved in that. But the CEO's involvement in the size of the House of Delegates was a professional issue that the president should have been driving, not the president driving with like the CEO as Siri giving directions.
Yeah. Yeah.
About where to turn, where to go, how fast to drive.
Why do you think the CEO had that kind of focus, or why do you think they kind of stepped out in that position?
No one stopped her. The CEO has a place to say who gets to be on the board. So why would you fight against the CEO if you want to advance in the board? If you're delegate at large and your goal is to be president or treasurer, why would you fight against the CEO?
Right. That's
When
killing your own career in the academy.
Right. And so I also knew that every time I spoke out and dissented in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
I was getting a tick against my presidency.
Mm.
The whole reason why I ran was
Mm-hmm.
to eventually become president.
Right. And at that point, though, you would have your hands tied in a lot of different areas.
Right. I mean, as a board member, we were given additional responsibilities outside of my role as Speaker-elect of the House,
Mm-hmm.
outside of all the committees I had to be a part of, outside of my full-time job.
Right.
I mean, this was a full-time job to be a board of director, and at least a part-time job.
Mm-hmm.
And the respect given to my time did not exist. The other thing that the CEO was a part of that was a professional issue was the name change suggestion about the Lenna Francis Cooper Memorial Lecture Award. Again, not an organizational issue, a professional issue. She is considered to be a founder of the dietetics profession, as an organized group of dietitians, after all. And her involvement in that, and I know we'll talk about this later, her involvement in that seemed completely out of line, and out of step with the role of the CEO. To me, this should have been a complete presidential issue. And I did ask, why is it that the roles of the president and the CEO seem so aligned. Why don't they seem like two separate roles? And I got a lot of like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
The
people saw it. Sounds like people were seeing it, but you were the one to voice it, basically.
And no response means we don't talk about this.
Yeah.
I come from an Italian family. I know what we don't talk about, you know?
Right. Yeah. You can feel the vibes. You can feel the energy.
Yes. We do not talk about this.
Since you brought up the topic of the Lenna Francis Cooper situation, and I shared information about that at the beginning of this video, how did you feel like that process of investigation, how did you feel like that process went overall?
It was almost like doing a group assignment for class, handing it over to the professor, and then them throwing it out. That was what it felt like. So the complaint about Lenna Francis' name being affiliated with an award was brought to the board in conjunction with the allegation that she may or may not have been part of the eugenics movement via a relationship with Dr. Kellogg's, of Kellogg's cereal, who ran a sanitarium in the early 1900s and was like hardcore in eugenics.
Wild. He was wild, man. Wild guy.
Wild.
No, yeah.
The general consensus of the board was to ignore the complaint, was to do nothing. It's from a small group of people. They don't drive the organization. They're not going to make the board do whatever or have conversations that don't impact the profession on a greater scale. And it's all rumors. We need to protect our founders, was the viewpoint. I was like, no. That ain't gonna, no. If we say nothing again, I know what it's gonna make us look like.
Right.
Aren't optics,
like, if they're okay with that.
Thankfully, another one of my colleagues, the only Black dietitian on the board at the time, spoke up. And then another minority board member spoke up, and then someone else spoke up who was not a minority, and then the board was like, okay.
Interesting.
Gay board member, Black board member, you take care of it. Since you care about it so much, you do it, was kind of what happened. I'm always down to be voluntold, you know?
Right.
We've all been voluntold in our positions before. So, okay, fine. Thankfully, I knew her really well. Like I said, I've been with the Academy for so long. I had so many good relationships with folks that I was more than happy to work with her on this. And so I like Dewey's Decimal Systemed my way through catalogs of information.
That's a lot of digging. Again, this is all volunteer. You are doing a lot of research into this topic in particular because it's a lot of it was hidden.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm a dietitian, so I'm type A. Of course, I'm going to do my homework before I say anything.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I found books from the early 1910s that Lenna had written about vegetarianism. I read early articles about Dr. Kellogg's and eugenics and how Lenna came to meet him. And she met him by his wife, who was a nurse, and they became like besties. Then there's financial data to show that not only was Lenna getting paid by Dr. Kellogg because she was an employee of the sanitarium, but also by virtue of stocks. So he had given her direct stocks. So he was paying her directly in stock dividends, in addition to her being an employee.
Wow.
So to say that they were not connected is just false.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't just like a distant relationship, like some knowledge of each other.
No.
They were close.
No.
Yeah.
They were hosting dinner parties. They were doing all the things together. So Dr. Kellogg had the first ever race betterment conference in the early 1900s, and during which Lenna gave a breakfast to other dietitians. We're very hospitable. And she hosted a luncheon at the first race betterment conference. So she was there and she was engaging people.
Yeah.
She was part of the Better Babies contest, which is how to breed a genetically advanced white baby. I reported all of these different things with direct screenshots of the book, because you can't scan everything. Of things that I was able to find online, of articles, of the pamphlet from her luncheon at the Race Betterment Conference.
Wow.
I found everything that could have possibly existed on paper in the early 1900s.
Wow.
My colleague and I brought it all together into a huge report. Again, we had a list of references. I also attached those references in. Like I said, when I could screenshot, I did. We went to the board with that information, and I was told, well, the president at the time said, okay, thanks so much, Zach. Why don't everyone else look into the research as well and come up and see what you come up with?
After all work.
I literally just did months of research, and you're telling everyone else to go do the same thing that we just did.
Yeah.
Of course, we're not allowed to say anything, so we didn't say anything. And so the next board meeting came up, and they were asked to report on what they found. Naturally, no one had anything different, because there's nothing different to find.
Right.
So
I think that's kind of just a slap in the face too for being voluntold to do all that and do all that work, and then being told, okay, but I still don't trust maybe all of this information, so others go and validate this, basically.
The way it was communicated non-verbally to me was that what you found doesn't align with my beliefs, and so I want to further question this because I don't want to have to do anything about this.
Mm-hmm.
And what you found means I got to do something.
Yeah.
There was a lot of eye rolling. Several of the white dietitians on the board said, well, it was back then. I mean, what do you expect? Some of the white women said, we shouldn't disparage the name of one of our founders because of what she did in the past. Everyone has a past.
Right. There's a lot to unpack there. Not surprising, but a lot to unpack.
I would always love to give the benefit of the doubt and say that it was that board at that time. But when you have the same 10 people rolling through volunteer positions because of the limited access provided to be a board member in your career position, how could it be that different? I mean, if you're really looking for people in academia and people who are retired, i.e., people who have more flexible schedules,
right?
You're not looking for the commoner dietitian to be a board member. And so how different is the board term to term when that is your pool of candidates?
And even at that, it doesn't change the fact that while, her experience led to the academy, right? But the fact that there was such pushback against changing the name of the award. We can't change that history, but we can do what we can to acknowledge it and make change where it's appropriate, like changing that name. So
we did not acknowledge it.
Yeah.
What we did was eliminate all names from all awards.
Instead of putting out a statement of being this is what was found, this is not who we are, basically, yeah.
We're not going to have any names for any awards because we don't want to acknowledge what Lenna Francis Cooper did.
It made them
And
uncomfortable.
they put out a little statement in a paragraph somewhere in the Eat Right web sphere. It's not easy to find. I don't even know if it's still posted. But they put that up, and that was it. That was the beginning and end of the entire communication strategy. In comparison to the lack of communication about the Lenna Francis Cooper renaming, the communication that went out about the Cambridge article with the funding, there was a lot of communication about that, about misleading reports. I got an e-blast. There were social media posts. There was a huge thing on the Academy website. They pushed that out in huge ways. And I saw the level of communication that is possible. And to see that level of communication that is possible by something that was deliberately chosen to focus on, I was disappointed that the same amount of attention couldn't have been given to other more important professional issues than just standing up for yourself because you felt like you were blamed for something that you didn't feel was true.
Right. And it's interesting because the concern with Lenna Francis Cooper, they're not they're not her. So it's just interesting to see that response and that lack of response when it's not even an issue about themselves. Like, it seems like it was taken personally. I don't know.
It very much gives Florida.
Yeah.
We're not going to talk about
thinking of that.
We're not going to talk about racism. We're going to ignore that racism exists.
Yeah.
We're going to ignore our history, and we're going to take down all the statues and just put everything under the rug. But don't you dare call us any names.
Right.
Don't you dare say anything bad about us, because then we'll come out and get you.
Yeah. So one of the things that you had mentioned in your letter that I was really taken aback by was you mentioned the CEO again mentioned her desire for the Academy to become an organization that centralizes its focus not around its declining membership numbers, which that has been going on for a little while now, but around offering products and services as described, similar to the Institute of Food Technologists. One, the declining membership issue. Why do you, there's more to unpack in this question, but why do you think there is that declining membership?
Well, there's a few reasons. So first of all, when you go on Eat Right Pro, it mentions how the Academy represents more than 110,000 dietitians. That gives the misleading idea that we have over 110,000 members. We do not. We have less than 60,000 members. So when I did ask, before this, why that number is so blown up. It's because the Academy does policy work, and they feel that because they do policy work, they represent every dietitian in the country.
Yeah.
Well, when you ask dietitians who are not members of the Academy, they would not say they're represented by the Academy of Nutrition.
Not at all.
And it's by choice.
Yeah.
They don't want to be. That distinction is so important. And that's one of the reasons why numbers are declining, is because, number one, there is an inherent culture that is not suited for younger generations. Younger generations connect in so many ways that they don't need a professional organization to connect with other dietitians.
Right.
They don't need to be an Academy member to find other dietitians who work in oncology. The purpose of the networking leg of the Academy, which is one of the top 2 reasons every year that people attend FNCE, because we have that data. Networking is not important to younger groups of people, generally. Right. So new members are not joining the wave. Interns are a great group of people who join because they're asked to.
Yes. Oh, yeah. We're heavily encouraged to.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I encourage my interns to also, because of the resources that young dietitians can get who may not know where to look.
Right. There's quite a bit of resources.
But I don't say it's for networking, because that's not going to be a draw. I mean, how many dietitians could somebody know now who's in nutrition school by virtue of Instagram?
Right.
Or YouTube.
Or TikTok. Yeah.
Right. Or TikTok. Yes, absolutely. The second reason is that many dietitians leave the profession, leave the professional organization when they start having kids and getting married. So what you see is this bell curve of interns being members, becoming dietitians, and then falling out the wayside, because that's around the same time people start getting married and have children. And then they don't stay members until they become retired, or as they're later and settle into their careers, and then they rejoin and become volunteers.
Gotcha.
But then those retired folks start to die, and that's what we're seeing right now.
Okay.
So we have this, they're calling it internally the gray wave or the blue wave, meaning that so many retired dietitians are not becoming members anymore because they're not living, or because they are not spending money on that anymore. At the same time, that the largest chunk of people are not members because they're having families and focusing on their careers. And the smallest group is still becoming dietitians, but not sticking through.
That's interesting.
So there's the demographic reason, there's a cultural reason, and there's the reason that a professional organization that yearns to be the size and scope that it is, isn't necessary anymore. And so the culture piece that I hadn't quite gotten to, it has to do with all of this mismanagement from the board. The lack of communication about Lenna Francis Cooper, the lack of communication about Kraft, about the Kraft cheese. Really, the Lenna Francis Cooper thing could have been a great opportunity for the board to bring in more members.
Yes. Oh, yeah. It would have. It would have. Absolutely.
It was a misstep.
Yeah.
The lack of transparency about funding. We know how the Academy feels when they're being blamed for being funded in certain ways, but we still don't.
Interesting that they didn't put that information out like first. Like it was a response kind of thing.
Right. So I'm a Zennial. I'm 38. So I remember a time before computers, and I also know how to manage TikTok. So I'm right in the middle. And my age group cares about that stuff. And of course, so do many other people. So I don't want to, single out one generation, but especially those younger than me, we care about the beliefs of the organization. We care about the heart of the organization. It's not enough anymore to just say that we offer you services and resources.
Right. It's who are they? What do they stand for?
Right. So I believe the CEO's intention the whole time was to get rid of that. All the things that make the Academy member driven, and just turn it into a hub to make, I don't know how else to put it, but to make money. Because if you're only offering products and services, all those things bring in revenue. Like
the continuing education, the books.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
What doesn't bring in revenue is networking.
Yeah.
But it does bring in membership. But membership is a very low number in regards to the revenue that the Academy brings. The majority of it is stocks. The stocks keep the Academy alive. Every year, because of the low membership numbers, we don't even make it into the green. At least the entire time I was on the board and on the finance and audit committee, and before that, we never made enough money that we spent in that given year or the previous one. We were always dipping into our residuals. but our stocks make such good money that we have millions and millions and millions in our stocks that it really doesn't hurt the academy that we don't make the money that we spend every year.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And so such a small portion of that is membership dues. Then what's the purpose of having membership dues to begin with?
Right.
And that's why the CEO should be making professional decisions. That is their position as an organizational leader.
Mm-hmm.
And then the president should come in and say, no, that is not this organization.
And you had kind of talked about you had expressed a concern about that being the focus of like products and services, right? That you had mentioned that like dissenting opinions were not really encouraged in that way either.
Right. I mean, it was clear that I was there to listen to the CEO and the president and not to speak. We were not, it was infrequent outside of a large board meeting that we were asked to provide direct input on something. It wasn't, this is what I'm asking you to do. What do you think about it? It was, this is what I'm asking you to do.
And the CEO's salary was also increasing around this time, right?
Right. So I had a voice on the Finance and Audit Committee, as well as the selection committee for all the committees. And the selection committee was me and the president-elect at the time. So when I was speaker-elect, she was president-elect. I had found cracks in the foundation in all of these conversations. I expressed concern about any of these cracks in any of the foundations that I saw in any of these different roles that I was playing. I would often get an email back saying like, while I appreciate your viewpoint, your opinions do not reflect that of the large organization. I received an email once because I missed a committee meeting, which was large, and I did not have a significant piece in those meetings. I was often there just to listen and provide any feedback that I might have in my brain. I sent a message to the entire group before the meeting had started saying, I'm slammed at work right now. I'm literally running the line in the kitchen trying to feed veterans. I cannot get off of the line to attend this meeting. I'm so sorry. I got an email from the president-elect at the time berating me for not being in the meeting. And like, I need to figure out my professional world if I want to be on the board. No. No. I am quite set in my professional world. This is my job. I don't need to reconsider that, but maybe I should reconsider my job on the board. Because I had a job to do to feed people. And
right.
If we are dietitians, if anything, at the end of our day, our role as dietitians is to make sure people are fed.
Right.
No matter what we do, if we're clinical, if we're in food service, if we're community, if we're in education, it's all in the end of putting nutrition into people's mouths.
And is that kind of what kind of just ended it all and got you to start creating or writing your letter of resignation?
Still no.
Oh.
Still no. It continued. And so the CEO's salary and my conversations in the Finance and Audit Committee were really the straw. So there was talk about cutting all travel for all members of leadership in the academy, whether you're a MIG, whether you're a DPG, whether you're on the House of Delegates, whether you're in the Lifelong Learning Committee. No travel, no lodging, no nothing. We're cutting everything, which means the House had to meet virtually. It worked during COVID, and the platform that we were able to use did make it reasonable, but it really diminished, having a virtual House of Delegates meeting really diminished a lot of the good that comes from that meeting. Because the thoughts that come up that are most helpful normally are not the thoughts that come up during the meeting. They're thoughts that come up at dinner afterwards, during the bathroom break. when you're not thinking about it. And that's really human behavior. We have learned that after COVID, how important it is to be together. But this was not seen as a priority for the House of Delegates. So travel was prohibited and they were not to meet in person.
Mm-hmm.
But the board was allowed to travel. And we were given about $150 plus or minus $1,000 to travel in order to interview the new CEO.
Oh.
Interview. So I said, this is ridiculous. The conversation went like this. We're limiting travel, but not for us. Well, why? So we could interview the CEO. And I'm like, hold up. You want to spend this much money to interview the CEO because you don't feel that interviewing the CEO over Zoom is a good way to assess somebody. But you're preventing 100 plus people from meeting about the profession because they can do it over Zoom. And that fired some people up. And so then I started to get disparaging comments live in person on the call. Well, Zach, you really don't know what you're talking about. I've been a dietitian much longer than you. And I'm like, yes, you have been on the board longer than me. You have been a dietitian longer than me. I'm also one of, if not the youngest person on the board. So shouldn't my input be just as valid because of a difference in perspective? I really don't think it's a good look that we're telling all these groups that they're not allowed to meet, but we're meeting in Chicago several times to interview somebody. Not to mention that the House had been continually competing against a membership dues increase. And the reason why there would be a membership dues increase is because we weren't making any money and we needed more money for the CEO. The CEO felt that her salary was too low and that we needed to increase the salary. The number that was mentioned may not have been an accurate number in reality. But the comparison number that was given was about $300,000 a year. And so if we wanted to hire a top talent CEO, we needed to be competitive with the market. And so we needed to use more money to bring in a better CEO who would require a higher salary. The comment was, well, I'm of a generation where we need to meet in person.
For that,
and I'm like,
but not...
I said, okay, listen. And while I respect your generation, I feel like your generation is also missing the point that the entire House of Delegates and other groups are not meeting.
Right.
Another voice came in. Well, the board is more important. And I went, the board is more important than the House of Delegates meeting? Absolutely. I'm like, I'm done. That was it. That was when I said I can no longer be in this group because our missions are not aligned. I cannot convince the president, the treasurer, all these people that our core values should change. The speaker role is a significant role with a lot of responsibilities. None of them are changing the culture of the Academy's board of directors. The House leadership team positions are really big positions that require a lot of tasks week after week after week. Like I said, it's more than a part-time job. Never had I imagined that I was inadvertently running on a platform to be the change maker for 15 to 20 adults who have been in the profession longer than me to change our core mission and values. Because what we were doing was not in line with what we were presenting to the public and to the members. And I could not do it anymore.
And that says a lot because as a member, I was involved more. I was on some committees and then kind of just got busy with life, moving around, had a baby. But still, that kind of energy of what you were saying on how it's the alignment is just not so much there. That's what it feels like as a member. It feels that way.
The smaller groups do such good work. It's really sad how limited resources they get to function. The MIGs, the DPGs, the small committees and task forces. I mean, that is where the fire is ignited. That is where you feel the change. That is when you feel the values and culture emanate through the leaders, because the board has nothing to do with them.
That's so sad.
Nothing. You start there as a leader. Every leader in the academy has pretty much started from the ground up like I did.
Oh,
Unless you are whomever and you're just go right into being a board member as not a dietitian. I don't know how that works. What the MIGs do and what the DPGs do, stay inside the DPG MIG infrastructure. What the MIGs do barely makes it to the board level. What the DPGs do barely influence one thing that the board does. None of that. It's all in silos. Beautiful, well-working silos. And the DPGs will work with each other really well, and with MIGs, and with MIGs to other MIGs, and vice versa. And they'll bring in a task force, and you see collaboration and communication. You see really beautiful things going on. But again, if we're not increasing membership numbers, then to whom are these member groups serving?
That's so unfortunate because of the good work and the excitement that you feel in those smaller groups.
100%. The vibe is totally different.
Yeah, it is. So what would have to happen for you to, like, do you ever see yourself being part of the academy in the future?
So I just finished a short-term responsibility with a member interest group to help out with their communication strategies. Once the word got out that I resigned from the board, which was the first time any board member has ever resigned in the history of the academy, I was told.
Oh, wow.
I had groups from all over wanting me to be with them. I was asked to be chair of this DPG, chair of that DPG, chair of this MIG, chair of that MIG. And I'm like, I don't believe in it anymore. I would be doing, who you think I am now is not who I am anymore. Who you think I am is the person before they became speaker-elect. I am not that person anymore. I'm not the best person for the job. I was offered to run communications, though, for a MIG, and I thought, well, I'm really good at this. I can help out. This group needs me. I definitely believe in improving communication within the academy, so I can get behind this. I can put my heart behind this, so that's what I'll do. And I loved doing it. I'm not renewing my membership, and I don't feel that is going to impact me. I don't feel that I will not have access to resources. I do not feel that I won't have access to CEUs. Right. What it would take for me would be a clear and deliberate change culture that you don't need to be a member to see.
From the top.
Absolutely. And it needs more than just hiring a black CEO. I'm glad that they hired a black CEO, obviously. Break the glass ceiling, black women in powership levels. Yes, I'm all about all of it. And I'm not saying they check the box either. I'm just saying it's more than that. Optics are no longer going to cut it for me. Yeah. I want to see the president of the academy instituting communication strategies to bring black students into the profession. I want to see the president's strategic advancement groups going to every middle school and high school in low income Latino and Hispanic areas to encourage nutrition as a profession. What are we really doing to increase diversity in the profession?
Mm-hmm.
One step is
actively kind of going opposite with changes in requirements to become a dietitian.
Right. And ASCEND and CDR were not on the same boat as the academy when the decision came down to the line to make the master's degree a requirement.
Oh, I didn't know they were.
They were going to bail at the last minute.
Oh.
And they were going to bail at the last minute because they did their own research that showed they were going to disadvantage a lot of people of color. And the CEO said, oh no, we're moving forward with this. It's too late to go back now. We're doing it. And here we are.
Wow.
I was literally a part of that conversation.
That's oh my gosh. I mean, even when I think about myself, like I'm a first generation college graduate, and the idea, I mean, I don't even know if I would have gone to become a dietitian. I took so many small steps and spent so much time thinking I wasn't able to be one for a variety of reasons. But yeah, that puts a whole lot more people.
The Academy Foundation gives a lot of scholarships out, and they will make sure we know how many scholarships go out to non-white dietitians and non-white students. In order to get my master's degree, I'm over $200,000 in debt.
Yeah.
$20,000 is but a few classes.
Yeah.
You're not really supporting a Black or brown student to get to the master's degree level.
Mm-hmm.
They might have that scholarship for that semester.
Right.
To what end?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that it's the Academy's responsibility to do that. But at the same time, we're being asked to advocate for our own salaries and then make $1 million by donating to the foundation.
And paying for the supervised practice. The internship portion.
Right.
Yeah. And I believe several of them are not allowed to have any kind of paid employment while you're participating in it too. Several of them.
I will say
some of them have stipends.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I will say that the VA does pay some VAs pay for their internships. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Some universities have looser programs that allow you to work. But I worry that we're just creating another funnel, another funneling scenario where we're bringing in a lot of students who are not ending up as dietitians.
Mm-hmm. For a variety of reasons.
Yeah. And I feel like we need to make a more concerted effort to make that happen. And that is what would take me to come back, because I feel like it's business as usual. Whatever changes every president has made since I was on the board, I really can't count the things that I know about.
Mm-hmm.
And if my professional organization is going to want hundreds of dollars in membership dues for me every year, I also shouldn't have to dig for the information to see what they're doing.
Right.
Like, do I got to research what my professional organization is doing?
Right. The transparency. Not there.
Not there. So I think that's what it would take for me, is really true, transparent, actualized change.
Easily seen.
It must. If I need Jimmy Fallon to talk about that. The biggest thing that I would say, the biggest takeaway that I need to express is that I think there is a perfect place in this world for a nutrition-based professional organization to exist. And that I think it could be a valuable tool in truly advancing the profession so that we can improve America's health. I believe in that future. I currently do not believe that the right people are in the right positions to make that happen. And I don't know what it will take or when that will happen. I would never discourage anyone from joining the academy. It's everyone's individual choice to experience what they experience. And if anyone has questions, I'm always happy to have that discussion, but I would never discourage someone from experiencing even a little bit of the journey that I got to experience from the beginning. Because truly, the academy helped my career at the beginning in all the best ways.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of my colleagues felt that I should never have resigned without talking to them,
Mm-hmm.
without expressing my concerns to them, because I resigned quietly and I resigned without making a big splash because I didn't want to disturb the functions of the good that the individuals in the board were doing. However, I'm also not one to be easily convinced when my values are not being considered and when my core mission as a dietitian was being compromised. It's while it's no one person's responsibility to change culture, and every person has a role in it, you really have to have a strong president and a strong, supportive CEO to make things happen within the academy. Otherwise, the board members truly do not have much weight to things that they want or need to happen. There really doesn't go much time without me thinking about my time with the academy and what I experienced when I was on the board. I think about it a lot. I am not sorry for standing up for my beliefs and making them well known. And I'm not sorry for doing what was best for my own well-being as a dietitian and as a person. After I resigned and I only gave the letter to the president and the CEO and the speaker at the time, assuming that everyone would communicate. Unfortunately, my fellow board members told me that after I had resigned, no one had any idea until the following board meeting where the president told them that Zach had personal issues. And that was all that was said. And so I don't have personal issues. I think that's really important for me to say. I do not have personal issues. I had very professional issues with the president and the CEO and the movement that they were making while I was in a board position. While I hope that changes over time, and I look forward to that change happening, that was definitely not the moment for me to be in that position. And I think the decision that I made was what was best for me and for any future progress that the remaining board members could have had, because I don't know that I was in the place to actually make those kinds of moves after being treated the way that I was.
Wow. That part about the personal issues or the issues, that's huge. Wow. When you had posted your public information, when you had posted that you had resigned, was that after they had had that meeting again and told people that you had those issues?
Yeah, I started to feel really upset that the honesty wasn't still there. It was another attempt to hide something under the rug and not communicate it and not be transparent. So because that communication wasn't clear, I felt the need to say something myself. But again, fearful of retaliation, meaning might another leadership position in the future not be on the table because I made somebody angry?
Yep.
Might someone not hire me because somebody on the board knows somebody who knows a future boss of mine?
The dietetics world is pretty small.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to roll it out in a way that was passive, almost, in a way. But I don't have those fears anymore. And I just wanted to use this opportunity to thank you for letting me be here and be honest, because I really needed to get it off my chest.
I appreciate that you want to share this. And I think that a lot of members share in my experiences and feelings of there's some disconnect from the top to the rest of the membership. And so I'm really grateful. And I know other dietitians will be grateful for you speaking up. So thank you again for coming on here.
Thank you. And I appreciate it. And I had to bring up a lot of memories for this, but it's been healing in a way. And so again, thank you for that. I appreciate the opportunity.
You're very welcome. And if somebody would like to get in contact with you or just follow you on your journey, where should they do that?
So my website is still very active. It's the-sage.org. And I have a little function where someone can reach out to me. I'm also on Instagram. It's a personal and professional combo profile, Z Cooks. So ZCOOKS.
That wraps it up for this interview and for this video. This took me a really long time to make. Not just gathering the information, there was that, but mostly because of my relationship and my history with the Academy. I've gotten so many benefits as in my time as a member, and the connections that I've made, the support that I've gotten has played a huge role, and I am forever grateful for that. It was a struggle to put this together and discuss something that is inherently leaning towards kind of a negative place. I want to be positive at that same time by not talking about the hard stuff, by not having hard conversations, running away from conversations. I think we stifle our growth. I think it's important to unpack fears about having challenging conversations. Just because something is challenging and maybe a little bit negative to discuss, that does not mean that we shouldn't discuss it. That leads, in my opinion, to toxic positivity. Thank you so much for watching this far. Please leave a like if if you enjoyed it. And we have these kind of conversations mostly about nutrition MLMs on this channel. So if that's something that interests you, then subscribe. Thank you again so much to Zach for sharing this information, for talking about this, for the bravery in sharing that, because I know that I have not been on as many committees and not as tied to the Academy as Zach has, and so I can only imagine how even more challenging this is. Zach, you are a mover and a shaker. That term gets thrown around in the Academy, so I just had to say that, but it's true. You're doing incredible work. I appreciate you. So happy to have you as a friend. I will have his information linked down below, so go show him some love and support. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, you can strive for health without subscribing to diet culture. I'll see you later. Bye.